Hey everybody, BreadBoyWeeb here. So, on the same sort of themes of my Ash video, I wasn't calling for an Ash ban, by the way. Some of you couldn't pay attention for 5 minutes. I've been sort of doing a deep analysis of some of the major pillars of Yu-Gi-Oh! Generic boss monsters, hand traps, but there's one card that truly makes zero sense to me. Called by the Grave. Why does this card exist? Why was it printed? And why is it still in the game? Unlike the last video, I'm not doing a both sides idea with some back and forth. This vid is pure propaganda to radicalize anyone watching against Called by the Grave. But why do I fervently hate this card so much? After all, I did say Ash was quite powerful, so strong that I even considered an errata for it. Wouldn't I like a card that stopped Ash, like Called by the Grave? No, because hand traps are a central part of Yu-Gi-Oh!, whether we like it or not. And I do for the most part. It's unfortunate we have to play the game with the same hand trap in every deck 100% of the time, and in the OCG they have to play these two 1000% of the time, but no system is perfect. But I like having some sort of meaningful interaction against your opponent when you're going second. Because going second in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is almost universally a bad thing. Perhaps this statement will age poorly, but especially in the last 7 years, going first is the goal of 95% of meta decks. Because of this severe imbalance, Konami prints Called by the Grave, a card that helps you when going first. What? Yes, I know you can use it going second, but let me cook. If you're going first, and typically a combo deck, you have what we colloquially call a choke point, a card that absolutely must resolve to end on your strongest end board. Your deck's main game plan and strategy typically centers around one of these choke points, and your opponent has to interrupt that part to get the most out of their hand trap. Why can the player who already has an advantage going first also be allowed to have a card that can negate a majority of hand traps your opponent could be running? Yes, Called by is technically a 1-for-1 in card advantage, but real talk, card advantage doesn't matter if you get through the choke point and end on your massive monster combo, because even if they have an extra card or two, they aren't breaking a board like this without a very specific out. So the fact that you can just blank any hand trap your opponent has, and usually the only one your opponent has, is just disgusting. And unlike a hand trap, there's very little skill in resolving Called by the Grave. You pretty much just use it on your opponent's first applicable hand trap. At most, you might hold it if your combo is fine from a single Veiler but dies to something else, but that's a bigger gamble than Dice Jar. Worst part about this is if your opponent doesn't have any hand traps, you can just set this card and it's a better DD Crow. There's no downside to Called by the Grave, no situation where it isn't good, cause if your opponent is playing any deck of the last 10 years, there's a good chance Called by the Grave is gonna be a massive disruption by itself. There is no downside to the card, and I don't understand what gameplay they're trying to facilitate here. Yu-Gi-Oh! Already has a bad rep of solitaire decks. We do not need a card that feeds into that style anymore. The problem gets deeper if we look beyond the TCG because you. Maxi. I've already dedicated a vid to you, so I won't be long on it. This is the sort of gimbal lock that the OCG and Master Duel have sort of put themselves into, because in the OCG must have Maxi for some reason, and they don't ban ultra rare cards often. As a result, we get to play the Maxi minigame with Called by at 2 and cross out to 1 to some degree, which kind of functions as the same thing. Why am I specifying this? Because the OCG incorrectly thinks Maxi keeps combo decks in check, and even crazier, they think Called by keeps Maxi in check. All this does is facilitate a minigame that decides the match more than your actual archetype. Because if we do ban Maxi and Master Duel, I would also like to take down Called by with it. We don't need the rest of our hand traps to by chance get negated and give us zero hope to win. It's already bad enough going against full power Snake Eyes. Droll against Bonfire is the best chance you have. Getting Called by it is just awful. One of the major themes I have with these design critique videos of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is highlighting how one central problem Konami refuses to deal with eventually snowballs into a gameplay disaster. So what is the solution? Well, first it's obvious, ban these two in every format they exist, but also design cards that interact with hand traps and going second in a much more interesting manner. And you know what? I gotta give it to Konami. They absolutely have been doing a great job in that second one the last few years. While I wish they would stop being a bitch and kill the previous ones, cards like Triple Tactics Talent, Thrust, and even Droplet are some of the best designed cards in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Talent's giving you one of 3 effects if your opponent activates a monster effect during your main phase is genius, because it gives you a way to fight back against a hand trap without you just negating it with no thought. I love it. Negates are kind kind of boring and mindless. Let me decide to either gain more card advantage or gain hand knowledge and remove my opponent's potential starter. Not to mention, this card is killer going second. Being able to take an Apollousa or Barone can be great for board clearing or negating further interaction. Thrust can get you any normal spell trap in the game, but if you're going first, you can't activate that card on your turn. This is also a phenomenal way to design a card in a world full of hand traps. Worst case scenario, if you get ashed, you get to set an Imperm or this. Real talk, why does this card exist, Konami? What is the point of this? But back to the video. But best case, going second, you can search a ton of different board clears or disruptors. These are the kinds of interactions that can take Yu-Gi-Oh! Beyond just negate, negate, and negate over and over. And if you're enjoying this type of Yu-Gi-Oh! Content, please consider liking and subscribing. We're getting closer and closer to 4K, I can taste it, please guys. But even when they miss the mark with cards like Spellbound, I appreciate them trying to make something interesting, even if it is just Dim Barrier's annoying little brother. So after looking at all of these cards, something like Called by the Grave just feels like a lazy and ridiculously designed card. An era of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where Konami was more obsessed with keeping Firewall in the game than worrying about any balance has created ripples that affect Yu-Gi-Oh! Even 6 years later. And I think the first step in undoing some of the damage is to ban Called by the Grave, and to continue releasing cards that give unique and creative effects when hit with some sort of interaction. But what do you guys think? Am I completely off? Is Called by the Grave your favorite card? Let me know. Comment below. Thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe. This is Breadboy Weeb, signing out.